I would like you to go ahead and open up a Word document. In this workshop, I'm gonna ask you to follow along with some activities, and then we're gonna go from there. All right, so go give you some time to open up the Word document or Google Docs document. All right, so here we go. The first thing is, I'm going to read this for you. It says, an evaluation of the effect of Class C fly ash and ground granulated blast furnace slag on the properties of ternary mixtures for use in concrete pavements was undertaken and is presented in this paper. So, what does that mean? Hello? All right, I just want to make sure, if you guys can text me to make sure that I can see. Okay, cool. I don't know, a message came up on my end. I'm like, oh, what's going on? You were signed out or something. Okay, cool, thank you. All right, sounds good. So when you read this, what do you get, right? What do you see with this summarization? It sounds very confusing, right? Or perhaps this is what you get. Yeah, something you got to read a few times is what I'm saying. Yeah, quite difficult, you know. And I'll tell you one thing. So I teach both business writing for freshman and sophomore, and I also teach advanced writing. And when I grade papers, that's me. I'm like, what did the students say? It's quite confusing. So the purpose of this workshop today is so that we don't get our readers to feel like that. Because one thing I tell my students all the time is we write for our readers and we don't write for ourselves. We write for our readers and not for ourselves, because we can simply say, we can write for ourselves where we understand what we're saying, but you know, what's the reaction of our readers, right? So in this workshop, which is called Learning to Write Concisely, okay, learning to write concisely, and like the words on the bottom, it says, keep it simple. Keep it simple. And the purpose of this workshop is for you to practice. In other words, I hear and I forget, I see and I remember, and I do and I understand, said Confucius. Okay, so Confucius said this. So let's, and it's true, right? We can hear some of these tips, some advice, we can hear some of these strategies, or you can see my slides. You'll try to remember, but when I put it into practice, then you'll understand what we're talking about for today. Something I'd talk about when we're talking about conciseness is get rid of all the fluff. Get rid of all the fluffy stuff in your writing. Too much gibberish, sometimes too much information, too much detail. And those are the things that we want to try to get rid of. And what I mean to get rid of fluff is get rid of meaningless information, or get rid of excess words. Get rid of inefficient wording, and cut down the number of words. And so I introduced to you the Paramedic Method in this workshop. This is a method that can help you in your concise writing. And I know as graduate students, I remember several years ago trying to put together, either a thesis or in my case, my dissertation, which was a very, very difficult task for many of you, having to write effectively so much that your advisor or whoever is reading it understands what you're saying. So when you hear the word paramedic method, you probably think, oh, paramedics, right? Yes, a paramedic being sent to rescue the meaning of your writing. So that's something that you can visualize. But actually, the paramedic method was introduced by Richard Lanham. He actually introduced this method. In this paramedic method, we use the paramedic method to edit any kind of professional writing. Editing your professional writing using the paramedic method will make your prose easier to read. Sentences that are easy to read are more persuasive and more user-centered. I mean, that's what we want to get out of our writing is persuasiveness. We're trying to convince our reader, because if it's confusing, then we lose the persuasiveness and we are not centered around the reader. Yes, you open up a Word document, and I'm going to have you do some exercise, and I'll let you know when we get started with that. All right, so this definition comes from Purdue Owl, in case you wanted to know. All right, now let's begin. Having your Word document out, go ahead and get it ready. Okay, so I want you to type this. Go ahead and type this. So I'll give you about less than a minute for those that are fast typists. Yeah, I know I can take this in about 10 seconds. All right, assuming that you've already done typing in or copying exactly these words. So the words say the CIA, with the help from the Nazis, accidentally helped invent the counterculture of hippies while they were trying to figure out how to brainwash communists. So, this is just an example statement, nothing really to interpret here. I'm going to give you a bunch of awkward statements that we can use and tear up. So in the paramedic method, there's step one. So the first step in the paramedic method is to find the prepositions. So the prepositions definition is a word governing and usually preceding a noun or a pronoun and expressing a relation to another word or element in the clause. So examples of prepositions here I give you: at, in, on, to, of, for, as, with, by, from, or any of others. I'm sure they're all. So what prepositions do, they drain all the action out of the sentence. So that's why our focus is on the prepositions, right? So now that we look back at this little statement here, perhaps in your chat box, can you tell me how many did you find? See if you can find them. Getting closer. All right. So okay, good. All right, let's see. Here's one. Here's another. Here we go. Here's another. And there's another. All right, so we found the prepositions. So now what I would like you to do is we're going to omit these prepositions. We're going to revise this statement by removing those and see how concise you can be, right? See how concise you can be. And again, when we revise, we don't want to change meaning from the statement. So be careful in eliminating meaning, okay? So once you do, maybe through the chat, if you can, let's see if you can type in a revised version. I want to see maybe some attempts to revise it before I reveal a concise way to revise it. Okay, yeah, I'm starting to see some. Okay. Okay. All right. So I see some people, yeah, giving it a shot, and we're shooting for even more conciseness. So see how concise you can be. All right. Okay. I think I saw one. Okay. All right. Okay. Good. All right. So here is a revised version. The CIA Nazi invented hippies while bring. Now, do we believe that? I mean, this statement, I don't know that I agree with that, but we did see some pretty good attempts. All right. So cool. Here's that. That's one way. So now we know step one, right? So step one was that. So now I want you to try the next one. So type this. What I'm trying to say is that the hobo is in need of a bath. So all right. So before jumping straight into the answer, let's just type it and I'll show you because even though you might catch it on this sentence, simple sentence, I want to give you the strategy so you can catch it in your own work. All right, so I assume you typed it already. So step two is to identify the is forms. Okay, so step two is to identify the is forms. So using is in a sentence gets it off to a slow start. Is form makes the sentence weak. So replace to be verbs with action verbs. Okay, so that's what we're trying to identify in the is forms. Okay. So here, how many is do we find? Okay, yeah, pretty simple, right? This one's pretty simple. So we find these two. Okay, now that we know that we found the is forms, let's get rid of them and let's revise it for conciseness and see what you get. Okay, so people are asking about the PowerPoint. Actually, at the end, I have a worksheet that you can take with you. That's a worksheet on the Paramedic method that you can use to for your own resource. Okay, see, so I saw some revisions earlier, and obviously this was the most concise form. So good job for those that are Super A students. Okay, let's go to the next one. So type this: eating beans is considered evil by the codes of Pythagoras. Some people might ask, who's Pythagoras? Pythagoras was in the times of the Greek philosophers back then. So there was a lot of controversy. I looked it up because I was curious, and yeah, just for you to know. Okay, all right, so step 3 in this Paramedic method is identify where the action occurs. In other words, who does what to whom. So when you look at your sentences, ask yourselves, who does what to whom? Following this progression yields active sentences. Now you see, one of the most common issues when I grade all of the students is writing in passive voice. It's common errors. So in here, we want to work, passive voice elongates the sentence, and active voice works towards conciseness, and also it works towards clarity in a sense. Okay. So in this case, we ask ourselves again, who does what to whom? So who is the who in this case? Who would you think is the who? Correct. Not Pythagoras, but the cult of Pythagoras, right? So that's the who. And what is the action in this sentence? Considers. Considers. Okay, correct, considers. So the action here is that the cult considers. So the action is taking to consider what? Consider what? Eating beans that it's evil. The act of eating beans is considered evil. Okay. All right, so now that we know this, what else? We're looking at the Paramedic method. What else should we consider when we're getting ready to revise for conciseness? What else should we consider when we look at the Paramedic method? Correct, Blanca. Good job. Yes, the is forms, right? There is the is form. So now, revise it for active sentence and everything that we just said. See if you can come up with a revision, and then see if you can post it on the chat and see what you get. Okay, all right, yeah, it looks like you got it towards action. There you go. Okay, we can use Pythagoras' code, possession. Right, we can use possession here. So now, this is one key. I think it really takes a lot of practice to then identify in your writing active voice. But if you focus on that next time you write either an email or you begin to compose a memo or anything like that, are you using passive voice or active voice? So think about that. Okay, so your next one, try this. Passive voice is not wrong. It's just we're aiming in this workshop. We're aiming towards conciseness, and passive voice is not towards conciseness. It's elongate, and active voice clarifies your sentences, and you'll notice that in writing. Okay, so once you type this here, let's look at step 4. Step 4. In step 4 of the paramedic method is to put action into a simple active verb. Avoid compound verbs or auxiliary verbs. In other words, avoid where, was, will, has been, any of those in front of verbs. And instead, place the doer as the subject. Okay? Or we can follow this sequence. Put the subject first, the verb, and then the object. So a subject is the person, place, or thing that performs the action or the verb. And a noun or pronoun can be used as the object in a sentence, as object is the person, place, or thing that receives the action. Okay, so you working towards that progression. Okay. All right, so we're looking back to this sentence, although you might like shares music, that's perfectly fine. We're using only this as an example. Replace it with, I don't know, whatever music hurts your ears. So in this case, what is the compound verb here? Yes, have been bleeding, correct. Got it. So the compound verb. So here we see is the subject, right? This is the subject. And then what's the object? The ears, right? Okay, cool. So now that we know this, and now we're going to revise for conciseness, even though many of you already jumped to the revision. What's your revision? Once again, see how concise you can be. No. So I already see one that's very concise or good. All right. Okay, so I'm still seeing some passive voice or moving the subject towards the end of the sentence, and we don't want to work. We want to work towards the sequence of the subject, verb, and then the object. So the response would be shares music, bleeds my ear, which I saw from some of you guys. Well done. Okay, so now go ahead and type this. Okay, so now that you type this, so surprisingly, the fact of the matter is that on the ceiling of the Sistine Chapel, Michelangelo painted the image of God inside a human brain. And now, if you've ever been there, it's just the most gorgeous painting ever. It's just amazing. How did he do that there, right? Okay, so let's look at step 5. Step 5 is to start fast. Start fast and avoid meaningless introductory phrases. Identify these by is that after an introduction. Omit anything that does not change the sentence's meaning, because that's we want to protect the meaning of the sentence. And of course, lay down the doer in action as early as possible. Okay. So in this case, what is a meaningless introductory phrase on this example one I gave you? Okay. Good. So I'm starting to see. So it is this meaningless introductory phrase. So now that we've found the meaningless introductory phrase, see if we can revise this without changing its meaning for conciseness. And see what revision you get. Okay, I'm reading some, but you're missing some information. So be careful of omitting information. Hey, yeah. I think I just saw a correct one. All right, good try. So a revised version could look like Michelangelo painted the image of God inside a human brain on the Sistine Chapel ceiling. Using possession here. Yeah, you know, there's not one way. I know that some of you say, well, I could probably do it different or concise. It's perfectly fine. But these steps are introducing you to a way where you can identify whether it lacks conciseness. So there's other forms. It's perfectly fine. I saw some other ones that, you know, were good as well. So that should help you to identify meaningless introductory. Okay, so type this. Okay. All right, so you type that. So let's recap the steps, okay? Let's recap the steps. So first, it was identify and eliminate prepositions. Okay. The next step was to identify is forms and change them to active verbs. Identify is forms and change them to active verbs. Identify where the action occurs, or in other words, who is kicking who, right? Who's doing what to who. And then put the action into a simple, not compound action verb And then place the doer as a subject in the format as in this order: subject, verb, and then the object. And then the last one again was start fast and avoid meaningless introductory phrases. So if you're that student who likes to say, in the matter of fact of blah, 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 right? Or the other, I was just grading papers and I kept reading these from students. I am writing this email to tell you that, well, I know you're writing this email because I read it and I received it, so why do you have to tell me that you're writing this email, right? So meaningless introductory phrases, things like that. So capture those things that don't really need to be there, okay? Oops, I gave you the answer. So the answer here is, I believe gender inequality. So let's dissect the original one. In response to the issue of equality for education and occupational mobility. So this person is responding, right? Because then it goes follows, it is my belief. So we know that the first entire part of this sentence is meaningless introductory, because they're going to respond. It's the same example I just gave you. I'm writing this email to inform you that. Just inform me, just tell me. It is my belief. Well, we know that if you say I believe, it can replace all of that. And then we can replace school system by generalizing all schools, because the school system will be all schools, right? So therefore, I believe gender inequality exists in the schools, right? So that's one form. There's different forms that you can use. So that is the Paramedic method. It's very useful, and I have a handout. Let's see if I can figure out how to share this. Or how about this? Any questions on this before I figure out how to? The copy of the presentation, I could give you a copy. That's perfectly fine. I'll give you a copy. Yes. Let's see. How do I? Oh, I see. There you are. Okay. Did someone have a question? You raise your hand and then you put it down, but I couldn't pick you. Okay, yeah. So here's my first question. Most common errors that occur while writing a formal document, writing reports. I think here's the most common error, and this is very simple, that several students write their draft paper as their final draft paper. And I think that's where a lot of students miss the mark. Right, I remember a professor, we just had a meeting this, and the professor said that writing is hard work. Writing takes a lot of effort and a lot of technique. It's not where you just go to Grammarly and do spell check, because did you know Grammarly also has errors? If you're using that Grammarly, the automated system also has errors. Okay, so what if you have to use third person, let's say in this one? One believes gender inequality exists in the schools. Okay, so you want to get rid of third person is I, me, you. Okay, so those, just eliminate that. Okay, let me see. Where can I use this type of writing? Everyday writing is where you can use this. I mean, my whole time is spent on grading papers, and as I review this, it just reminds me of the things that I read that can substantially improve the meaning. Because look, when we write, we're demonstrating, we're putting together our logic, how we reason, how we interpret meaning of either if we're writing a report on something, how we interpret that, or our views of something, our critical thinking, right? But if the reader is trying to figure out what did you want to say in this, then that is where we lose our opportunity to communicate effective writing to individuals. So always put yourself in the eyes or the seat of the reader. Would this statement make sense to someone reading it, and not knowing too much of the information that you're writing about, right? So I always tell students that I put myself in an area where I didn't read the case, I didn't read the material, I don't know much about it, and then do I understand what you're trying to say? So put yourself in those shoes. Don't just, I say vomit text in there, because then you're just putting a lot of information, organizing it well, right? Let's see other questions. Yeah, in reports, this is one of the, all my exams for the advanced writing class is I always say you must use third person. So the third person means staying away from first and second person. Third person is using, I'll stay away from I, me, and you. So yes, third person is a easy way. So the simple answer to active voice is putting the subject first, putting the actor first. Okay, so I'm gonna get I have a quick video, so let me see if I can get this. I'll stop my slides. I'm gonna post a video that I always give to students on passive voice, because I think that's the most common error that not error, but you shouldn't say error, because passive voice is okay sometimes. So let me, here it is. Let me just get it and I'll post it to you. All right, so let's see in the chat box. Oh, let's see, here it goes. I think you received it, right? Okay. All right, so I got a question. Go ahead. Fiona, you have a question? Okay, so no. I gave you permission to unmute yourself if you want, Fiona. Okay. Here's another question. So for report writing, it is recommended. How can I state differently, or for that? You could just say one recommends. You're not saying I, me, one recommends. That's an easy way. Okay. All right. Okay, so that concludes my presentation on the Paramedic Method. Okay, if I guess I have another question. So not allowed for speech reports. Okay, so I'm not familiar what your professor usually puts the constraints on how you are supposed to report, but for speech reports, yeah, I wouldn't know exactly what your professor would be asking or putting in criteria, but I might want to ask a professor who, for speech reports, see if what their expectations are. Okay. Okay, so what I'll do is that worksheet I have, I couldn't figure out how to post this, but I'm going to give it to an administrator who will go ahead and post it or make it available for you guys. including the slides. I'll make sure I'll have the slides. But that concludes this workshop on the Paramedic method to use for conciseness. Okay, thank you guys for joining this workshop.